A portion of this video is sponsored by Best Buy. Can an Xbox replace your gaming PC? I mean, it supports 4K at 120Hz, you've got support for things like 1440p resolution, super fast SSD storage, and crucially now, loads of games actually support keyboard and mouse. Not to mention the biggest one of all, the fact that this is so much cheaper than a gaming PC, it is ridiculous. The graphics card alone in this actually costs more than the entire Xbox, because we are going for the most overkill, yet still moderately sized monitor we can. This is one that was actually supplied by LG. This is the GQ950. It's 32 inches, it's 4K, and if you run it on a PC, it will go up to 160Hz, whereas it will be 4K 120 over HDMI with the Xbox. The plan is very much to keep all of the variables the same, but literally just change the power cable and then I suppose one DisplayPort cable to one HDMI, so we can use the exact same peripherals, exact same chair, gaming mouse, keyboard, everything, and then we can see what works and ultimately what's better, and let's say the PC is maybe slightly better, whether that's worth the extra money. Oh, yeah, boy. Woo! Oh, yes. And when I say we're going big here, ladies and gentlemen, I mean it. We've actually grabbed ourselves some pretty high-end peripherals. This is the Logitech G Pro. This isn't actually the Superlight version, which is my favorite. This was a limited edition that was supplied by Logitech. I don't think you can get it in this yellow anymore, but there are loads of different colors available, especially if you go for the Superlight. Then you have the Logitech G915. And quite cleverly, all of these peripherals are actually available to buy at Best Buy. You can find these linked down below. A massive thank you for Best Buy for actually sponsoring this video. So let's give ourselves some power. We'll plug in the HDMI 2.1 to the monitor, lower everything down with a standing desk, grab ourselves a really good chair, and then in theory, just press the power button. But okay now, enough mucking about. This is a serious video, and the first thing I would want for this to be a proper PC replacement is, where possible, I don't want to have to use the controller. Obviously everything is going to be geared around this, but a proper user-friendly interface should allow us to actually use a keyboard and a mouse, and merely by mishitting it, we seem to have launched Red Dead Redemption 2. I guess we're starting there. I mean, to be fair, I do actually want to set this up and make sure everything is working properly, and you just press the little Windows key to get yourself back to the Xbox home. Essentially, this becomes your Xbox button, and we press enter, and I assume just use the arrows. There's not really much more to it than that. Yeah, we can navigate into the settings. The mouse does not work at all. Let's navigate over to TV and display options and make sure everything is set up. So yes, here we have 4K UHD, 120Hz, 4K details, and yeah, everything other than Dolby Vision is supported by this display, which is quite nice. So okay, let's navigate back into Red Dead Redemption 2. All very intuitive, no issues with navigation. But then sadly, we do immediately run into quite a big one, which is that obviously not all games will support keyboard and mouse. I mean, this was a game I was going to test a little bit later once we'd started with something keyboard and mouse, but it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, this is a controller-only title. But to be clear though, that is absolutely not a deal breaker, because for a lot of games, to be honest, you probably do want to use a controller anyway. So it's more going to come down to whether you actively like using a controller for games like this, or whether if you had the choice, every game available, you would want to use a keyboard and mouse. I mean, obviously something like F1 23, clearly you're not going to want to use a keyboard and mouse, but games like this where a lot of people would rather use a keyboard and mouse, that is definitely something you should strongly consider. And unfortunately, it's not just the input device that you might have issues with, because Red Dead Redemption 2 is an example of a game that is sadly capped to 30 frames a second. I mean, this one is especially annoying because unless my brain is not functioning properly, this was actually a Xbox One X game that obviously will run on Series X, but it never actually received a proper patch to enable it to run at 60 or even 120 FPS, even though its power is not being fully utilized here. So in this particular title, this is definitely something that you could consider running on PC if you did want to get the absolute best experience. But let's not take away from the fact that this game does look absolutely incredible. You are running it at a proper 4K resolution, and it is running at a very steady 30 frames a second, but especially when you're used to playing at 60, if not even higher levels of frame rate, to say it's noticeable is definitely an understatement. You can just feel the amount of input lag that you have here. And while the overall experience is smooth, it's definitely not ideal. But I think this is pretty much worst case scenario for the Xbox. So yes, if you are basing this just on Red Dead Redemption 2, then this is pretty much the whole PC versus console story that we've been hearing for years. But let's switch across to something that is completely the opposite, some Gears 5. And it does say press A to play, but I am now using a keyboard. Oh, we've got a cursor! We've got a cursor! This is it! It's like we're playing on a PC! Oh. And just like being on PC, you can also go into the options menu nice and easily, but you won't find anywhere near as many settings as you will on PC. They're obviously all chosen for you, which personally speaking, I think for most people is actually a good thing because it means that you just get a nice smooth experience out of the box. But you do get this option here where it says versus multiplayer frame rate, but it is gonna change really depending on the game that you're playing and obviously how intense the game is, because the more intense the game is, the lower the frame rate will be. And this is why games like, I don't know, Forza 5 for instance, don't have 120 Hertz mode, because there's just so much going on. They don't think you'd be able to hit 120 Hertz without having too many compromises. But we set this to 120 and then we will jump into some multiplayer. Oh, we won't, because I don't have Xbox Live Gold. Right, well, you join me in the heat of the action, and I'll start by saying you guys owe me £6.99. And I'm a noob. We knew that already. But moaning about £5 aside, I have to say it is really, really impressive. This is indeed 120 Hertz running on an Xbox, and it's really nice because this does feel like a high-end gaming PC. I mean, I can tell that this is not the true 4K resolution, but the thing is, in something like multiplayer, you're not really properly taking in all of the visuals anyway. I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that this is a 32-inch display, and obviously I'm very close to it. But I think for what we're trying to achieve here, it's working really nicely, actually. You also get variable refresh rate, which Xbox does support now. You get FreeSync Premium Pro. So you're not really missing out on too many PC features at all, to be honest. Genuinely, this is the most PC-like experience I think I've ever had from a console. Oh, yeah, boy. But let's press on to what is one of the most popular titles in the world, some Fortnite. Right, let's go over to the options, which again, we can use a mouse to navigate, which is good. Here are the settings, and yes, we do indeed have 120 Hertz mode, so we will turn this on. Well, the menus were 60 FPS, but literally the second that we get into the game, we have immediately swapped over to 120 Hertz. And we didn't get any like black flash or anything on the screen, so clearly we're still outputting at the same resolution, but the frame rate will dynamically change on the fly, assuming your TV or monitor, of course, actually supports 120 FPS. I mean, the image quality is definitely not the absolute best when you look into the distance while jumping out, but it does seem to pop into place once you get nearer to the ground. Yeah, no, this is absolutely fine. I really wouldn't have an issue playing like this at all, especially for, what, about £450 or so? Oh! I literally just landed, man. The other thing that I absolutely do want to shout out about the Xbox that is just glorious though is the fact that without any tuning whatsoever, this thing runs as silently as you can get really, or at least you can hope for with a games console. So we're still running this as flat out. I mean, we're in the lobby, but still rendering everything. And just listen to this. Like, it's as close to silent as you can possibly get. I mean, you've got the fan spinning at the top, and that's pretty much about it. I don't even know how it does it. I guess it's just quite a low-power device, and it's very efficient. And do keep an eye on the frame rate at the top right corner of your screen, because you can see that it does dip ever so slightly every now and then, but especially if you're using like variable refresh rate or something, it's not something you're really going to notice. I mean, the lows, oh, what's that, about 100 FPS? I think we hit the absolute lowest of about 94, something like that. This is a fantastic experience, it really, really is. Oh, ho, ho, yes! That was a one-shot kill. Oh, that's two. I don't know what the straw doll technique actually is, but I'm loving it. Got him. How many's that? That's 4. That's 5. Oh. No! But you get the point. I'm not a massive Fortnite player, but with this console, keyboard and mouse in Xbox, genuinely it works fantastically well. There is one more title that I think we absolutely have to test, and that is some Call of Duty Warzone. But while that's actually doing an update, I do also want to say that one other thing that I don't like about the Xbox is when it comes to expandability, because if you're running a PlayStation 5 or PC, you can just buy additional storage really easily. There are these internal M.2 SSDs, and yeah, they're actually really cheap. I mean, genuinely, go and have a look at the pricing, because especially over the last few years, they've come down massively. But the problem with the Xbox is, well, older titles you can plug in a USB drive and that's fine. For every title to work properly, you need one of these expansion cards, and while you can buy them, they are still very expensive, especially when you compare it to the likes of an equivalent M.2 that would work on both PC and PlayStation 5. So if you're fine with a terabyte, that's great, but expanding it is that a little bit more difficult and I suppose more expensive. As with all of the other games, let's check out the graphics settings. We've got depth of field, fidelity, FX CAS, a few PC features and things here. But then then of course fundamentally the big ones really, which are our 120 Hz refresh rate and then FOV that you can actually adjust, and this means that more will actually fit in the screen. This is quite often a PC feature, but it shouldn't be. It should be on a wide range of games. So it's nice to see that's enabled. We'll set that to 90. But otherwise, there's not that much more to report. So here we are then, the big one. What is our experience going to be like as we jump out of the plane? Let's have a look. And in terms of the quality, it's not actually too bad. I mean, it definitely wasn't fantastic when we first booted up the game. This is not like true 4K resolution, you can definitely tell that. But once again, I'm not convinced that it's a massive deal. I mean, it's not the absolute best. I think if you were playing this on PC with higher resolution settings, maybe DLSS, you would get a game that does look a fair bit better. This is just not the experience that I remember from when I played Call of Duty religiously on console. I mean, obviously, yes, having a mouse and keyboard absolutely helps, but that 120 Hz, if you do have a proper setup, makes such a big difference. But for the price, it's ridiculous. Oh! And that's the end of that. But that is enough of that. It is time to grab our Xbox, disconnect it, and move over to the gaming PC. And I do want to be very clear that I did want to go for something that was, I guess, comparative, fairly comparable really, but obviously was just that little bit better to show you the differences if you do want to spend a little bit more. And obviously the size between these two things is very similar, but the graphics card that's actually in here is an RTX 4070. It is a lot of money, and as I said at the start of the video, it is a lot more than this console alone. So when you actually factor everything else that's inside here, obviously this is a significantly more powerful but a significantly more costly rig. But fundamentally, of course, for most people, not only we get more performance, but it is a fully fledged PC that can run other applications other than just games. And of course, as we get this connected, it is worth shouting out the fact that this does use DisplayPort, which is a connection that has a bit more bandwidth actually than HDMI 2.1, and it is going to give us the benefit of being able to access higher resolutions and larger refresh rates. So for instance, with this monitor, we can actually run this at 4K 160 as long as we have the graphics horsepower to actually drive those frames to the display in the first place. But of course, the time has come to find out whether this is actually going to make any difference at all. So we will turn our console on, we're in, and obviously because this is running on PC, we do get quite a few more options. So we have our display options, and this is very similar to what you find over on Xbox, but if we go over to graphics, you'll see we have way more options to choose from. And again, some people are going to love this, others are going to loathe it. Here we go, we're in, and immediately this feels so much better, not only because we're using a mouse and keyboard, but because the frame rate is just so much better. I mean, the game looks absolutely stunning as well. I mean, you can definitely tell that these are running at higher settings, but the thing for me, like, quality is great, but it's all about the way that the game feels. And especially if you're using something like FreeSync or G-Sync as we are here, you get a level of frame rate if you're running at over 60 frames a second that just feels a whole lot I'm leaving this in the video. We're not cutting this out. Right, let's try that again, shall we? And as I was saying, you can clearly tell that this is running on a high-end PC because the quality you're getting compared to the console version is just so much better. And it's definitely more than the sum of its parts. I mean, you've got things like better draw distances, maybe better texture filtering, maybe the textures themselves are better. But it doesn't matter what it is, if you can run a game at the highest quality preset, a lot of the time it is gonna look better than the console version, even if these consoles are very powerful, and in certain games you are gonna get very close to parity, which is pretty cool. I mean, personally speaking, I probably still will play this on a TV with a controller, but if I was sitting at the desk, then it would just be so much nicer to have the choice between the peripherals in addition to the extra frame rate. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but honestly, the difference really is night and day. But okay, enough of that. Let's move on to our next title, some Fortnite, and we're going to jump out of the battle bus, as I remember it correctly this time. And actually, we're playing this at a lower frame rate at the moment. We're currently getting about 50 frames a second or so because we're running this at full 4K with DLSS set to quality, but pretty much all the settings other than ray tracing are set to absolute max. And this is clearly a much better looking experience. But as we mentioned in Red Dead Redemption, I don't actually want to trade quality for performance. I'd rather have more performance and have the game not look quite so good. So we'll have a little navigate around so you can see the difference. I mean, look at all of that detail, all the texture in the grass, the draw distance, everything is just super sharp, really, really visual. But again, it's not really the experience that I want if I'm playing a multiplayer title. So let's do just that. We'll turn it to 1440p. And I will change DLSS to balanced now, as it is a lower resolution. And then, yeah, you can see that the frame rate has now increased by quite some margin. It's very similar now to what you'll get on the Xbox, around about 105, 110, 100 frames a second or so. It's definitely worth noting that if you do want to go even higher than this, there is a dedicated performance mode that you just restart the game. It's a different renderer, and that will give you an even higher frame rate. But if you want to sort of have that mixture of better visual quality than you find over on the console and have a decent frame rate to boot, then this is probably the mode that you want to play in. But I'd always sort of recommend that you mess around with the different settings and things to find really what works for you. But the point is, there's plenty of flexibility here. You can, again, have it in like a fidelity mode, a performance mode, and I'd say actually the overall experience on the PC compared to the Xbox here is somewhat similar. There is also one other thing I want to do before we leave Fortnite though, and that is to show you the performance mode. And I'm not sure how similar or different this is to the console version, but essentially this is almost like a different renderer where it's more about, well, it's all about frame rate rather than the way the game looks. And to be honest, it don't look great. It is very, very obvious. There is pretty much no lighting effects. Everything is very, very flat. There's little detail. But you can't argue with that frame rate because this is running at native 4K resolution, and we are pretty much getting the full 160 FPS. We're looking at, what, about 200 as we hit the floor. And I think a lot of people are still going to want to use this mode. I hear it all the time. Why are you using all these visual settings when it's all about getting the highest frame rate possible? And obviously this is when having a gaming PC is definitely going to come in handy, because you can actually achieve all of those higher frame rates. I think this is more geared towards like 240, maybe 360 hertz monitors really, or those with lower end setups that just don't have the horsepower to get an alternative. But it's definitely, again, nice to have the option. But as you can tell, this doesn't, as I say, look particularly great, but it probably makes it easier to spot people, so definitely worth messing around with. Moving across to our next title, some Gears of War. Once again, we've got loads of options to choose from. I mean, this is actually one of the most, well, the largest options menus I think you can get in any PC game. It's ridiculous. I do like this minimum frame rate option, which is pretty cool, because that's a nice, easy way to say you want a minimum of 120 FPS, and then it sort of dynamically gets there without you having to fine-tune all of the settings. But if you have everything else set to ultra, then this is still not going to be ideal, because it will lower the resolution down too much. So we've got ultra textures across the board, that's all great, but then everything else I think we'll set to high. And I know what you're thinking, let's get ready for some multiplayer, but no, you're going to be a little bit mistaken there, because as this is the PC version, you can run it at over 120 FPS on whatever mode you like, right? You're not just hard capped to multiplayer, because multiplayer is a little bit easier to run. And we've got this running the campaign at the moment. We've got this set, as we know, to high settings across the board. And we're currently looking at 100 frames a second, which for a 4070 at 4K without any like DLSS or anything, I think is pretty remarkable. This is a game that looks absolutely fantastic. It's not really that old, but you could still say that it's aged well. I mean, to be fair, we do have that 90 FPS lock on as our minimum. So let's go back in to the settings. We'll turn that off, and you'll see that our true frame rate is still around about 85, 90 frames a second, so we might have had a tiny bit of dynamic resolution there, but actually not much. This is why I love settings like that, because you get that console level ease of use paired with the higher performance of our gaming PC. I'm interested what happens though if we turn this down to 1440p. How much higher is our frame rate going to be? Take your bets down in the comment section below without cheating. I'm going to say 128. Whoa, no, way higher than that. We've finally got a title that does hit our 160 FPS. There we go. Pretty much bang on the money at the moment. 164 frames a second in Gears of War in the campaign. That is what the PC is all about. Right, moving on to the other massive title, Call of Duty Warzone. Excited for this one. And we're going to set this to, I guess, the quality preset, really. Everything at high. DLSS, again, I'll set to performance. Hit apply, and then let's see what frame rate we get. And what are we getting? Around about 80 to 90 FPS. So again, it's not 120, but when you compare the quality of this to what we saw on the Xbox, it is once again night and day. I mean, we don't need to worry about keyboard and mouse support, because that was great on the Xbox, but you still get a greater degree of flexibility here, and you can fine-tune those settings to get the exact sort of trade-off you want, really. between quality and frame rate. I mean, it still feels very smooth. This is a game that is actually very demanding on the CPU. You do need a very good processor to be able to play this at higher frame rates. But yeah, I mean, I would be happy to play this. I would just personally want to turn it down to 1440p just to ensure we're getting the highest frame rate possible, really. And what has that done to the frame rate? It has increased it by quite some margin, around about 140 frames a second. So this is definitely now in the sort of realms of similar to Xbox, right? It is definitely slightly higher. I'd say that the image quality is similar though. I wouldn't be able to say, unless you have the two side by side, that I'd be able to say that the Xbox was considerably worse or potentially better. I'd say that actually they're similar. I mean, we're still getting some tree bugging out, but again, I think that's just Warzone being a Warzone there. So yeah, it's definitely nice to have that flexibility. It's good to be able to play a game and not have to worry about having a lower frame rate. It just would be nice if I wasn't taken out by someone that had literally just jumped in while I was talking to you lovely folks. But wait, there's more. There's a bonus game because, of course, one of the advantages of playing on PC is a larger library of titles. And look at this. This is a PlayStation exclusive, but it's running on our PC. And obviously, yes, there are Xbox exclusives, backwards compatibility that you can play on the Xbox that you won't be able to play on a PC. But these days, PC actually tends to have the largest amount of games. You've got PC exclusives, you've got the PlayStation exclusives that eventually come, and then you pretty much have day one tandem now with the Xbox games as well. So if you want to play everything without having to buy all of the consoles, actually the PC is the best bet. I mean, this is Ratchet and Clank running with DLSS set to performance, and we've actually got ray trace reflections on as well, when we're currently getting around about 40 to 50 frames a second, but it does seem to drop quite a lot. It doesn't like me recording, which I'm doing now internally either. And there is DLSS 3, but as soon as I turn this on, the game went a little bit buggy. But there is absolutely no doubt about it that this is a fantastic looking game. I mean, look at all of that detail. This is definitely something that I think will reward you, the higher end PC that you have. But having said that, once again, there's no reason not to turn this down to 1440 and just have a nice experience without spending a load of money, really. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw this in there, a little bit of bonus game for you. So then, ladies and gentlemen, that has been our hands-on testing of these two devices side by side, and I'm very, very pleased with what the Xbox has managed to achieve. I mean, it is incredible actually how capable this machine is. And yes, it's not going to be able to play 4K 120 Hz in pretty much all but a couple of titles, but I think for most people that specifically will play a game like Fortnite over and over again, if this does support it, then this is strongly worth considering, because it's all going to come down to the games that you actually want to play. And a lot of people say, I want to use a controller anyway, so mouse and keyboard support doesn't really matter. It's only going to be a few games where you want to play competitively. I'd say that the Xbox is the clear winner when it comes to value. I mean, if you want a 4K capable machine, then unless you already have a PC that you can upgrade, you're just not going to get anything close to the value of this. And this can output 4K, it's just not always going to be 4K 60 FPS, which is obviously going to annoy quite a few people. Whereas with this, as we've proved today, you can do 4K 120 FPS in a fair few titles. And while you might need to use some dynamic resolution scalers to get there, the output is still significantly better than you will find on the Xbox. But it is all going to come down to what you actually require. I mean, if it's just all about the games and you just don't want to spend crazy amounts of money, then clearly this is going to be the way to go. Whereas I would say that it's pretty clear that the PC is the better device because you've got better compatibility with games, true backwards compatibility that spans decades, and of course mouse and keyboard support, again, in pretty much every single title, even those that aren't specifically designed for mouse and keyboard. If you want to use it, usually you can, because that is the default that everybody has. Whereas this is the problem, I think, with Xbox. While they're getting there and mouse and keyboard is very nice to have, most people are just going to be using one of these, so it's not necessarily the priority, shall we say, for developers, but it is nice to see that that's changing. But let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think this has been an interesting concept? And ultimately, would you consider swapping out your gaming PC for an Xbox, especially if you're rocking something that's aging or you don't have a gaming PC right now? Are you interested in actually using a mouse and keyboard with this? Do let me know. And again, this video was sponsored by Best Buy, so if you do want to go and check out current pricing on things that were featured in this video, you can find them linked down below with our Best Buy links. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and we'll catch you in the next one.